Okay, hey folks, how's it going? Another quick audio check. Hopefully everything is working okay, but welcome back. We're going to be doing another stream here, just doing a live session for maybe an hour as we always do. And I'm going to try to keep this rolling as we've now been consistent now in the last couple of sessions. So hopefully you guys are able to join me and we can hang out for a little bit and sketch some out. So I kind of want to introduce this particular pop-up live stream as a couple of thoughts as to what I'd like to be able to explore for today. Of course, like I said, it will range a little bit in terms of things that we can talk about. Let me actually jump into the chat window so that I have that available in front of me. As people ask questions, I can have that chat with you. Okay, so as you can see, I have a couple of things in front of me, which is going to be first my sketchbook, and then an inspiration book, which I want to be able to share with you guys. What I'm going to be using today is actually a brush pen, which I haven't used in a bit. So we'll see how this goes today. About 8 p.m. my time, we're probably going to go for maybe an hour. And then from there, we'll break it off because I have other things I got to take care of tonight. But for the time being, I'm going to draw in this particular sketchbook, which is my leather-bound book that I've had last time. This book in particular right here, I'll share with you guys. Let me zoom in a bit closer and talk a bit about who this is and what this book is about. As you can see, some of you guys probably are realizing already the name Hokusai being right there. And this particular book I found it's been about 2 weeks now, a couple weeks ago, where I was at the Japanese bookstore here in LA, Kinokuniya, and I found this particular book. And I've always, of course, have known of Hokusai's stuff, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are very familiar with his particular wave print, which is probably one of the most reproduced images out there. So he's, quite prevalent, and especially in the art world, pretty well known, especially when it comes to like woodblock print and the classical traditional Japanese styling. This particular book I picked up, and I was able to flip through it real quickly because a lot of these books in the Japanese bookstores are kind of plastic sealed. So I don't know exactly what is internally to them. And of course, this is all in Japanese as well too, which I don't really know about. So I don't read Japanese. I don't know exactly what this is. But I picked it up because I flipped through a couple pages and it was hitting a couple things that I liked about it. So I kind of pinpoint out why I thought this book was kind of important. First and foremost, as I said, Hokusai being a more traditional woodblock print artist is kind of what he's known for. So you would expect someone who works in the side of entertainment design, illustration, or things like character work and creature work and the kind of stuff that I do may not necessarily look at this kind of stuff as a form of inspiration. But you have to kind of understand the history of Hokusai's work and his life and also what he's done in the past. He was never really like the richest individual, probably well paid enough in terms of certain moments in his life when he was teaching and producing some, pieces here and there. But there were moments in time in his youth when he was producing some work which well known, and he changed names several times. Hokusai is going to be one of the artists that I talk about in Lightbox Expo, this upcoming show, which is going to be October 14th, 15th weekend. So I'm going to have a discussion one-on-one with the meeting with Marshall Vendrick, and we're going to talk about our artists that we get inspiration from. So today I want to do a live stream version of one particular artist, being Hokusai himself. So Hokusai is, like I said, in woodblock print, but I look at that, it's like you might think, well, how do we apply this in like three-dimensional forms and whatnot? Because as being woodblock print, you would imagine it just being graphical in terms of the image type. And very much so, a lot of his images are very kind of graphic oriented landscapes. So he kind of focused on landscapes in the later period of his life. But in the early periods, he did a lot of these things, which at the time he coined the term mangas, which is just random drawings, is what it kind of means. Today, as young kids hear, the term manga, they think about, cartoons and not cartoons, like graphic novels and comics and stuff like that from Japan, animes being animations. But, you don't necessarily hear that term applied towards someone who's more traditionally oriented. So again, a lot of this stuff feels very, very graphic and 2D based on the shapes in which we have, which are great, and it's good for like compositional stuff and shape language and, plays upon graphics and values and whatnot. So again, nice prints, great for things like maybe like shirts and stuff today, especially you see on walls and frames. So when I flipped through the book deeper, I got to a point in which I started to see things that felt a little bit more up my alley. So it kind of goes, I think, a bit more into his earlier periods of stuff. And back when he was younger, he actually used to produce these manga, these little booklets that essentially had collections of his drawings and work in them. I discovered this kind of stuff a couple of years ago from Hokusai by random, and I've known of his work since I was in high school art history class and stuff like that. I didn't realize that he actually drew quite a bit. Now, keep in mind the fact that we're talking about like the late 1700s, 1800s, something like that. I can't remember exactly the time period. So this is from a while back, and especially when it comes to that period we're talking about, from the 18th century, looking at Europe, that kind of art styling, which we're all familiar with when it comes to art history. But in Japan, again, a lot of the stuff we probably weren't introduced to as much. But at the time when he was around, he was doing a lot of sketch work with ink and brush. So still, you might imagine it being very two-dimensional. But as I go deeper into this again, the book, I start to see these really great studies of characters and dragons and lions of its own interpretation with this really, really great brushwork. And there's some fantastic movements of indication of hatching, of lines. And at first, it feels very two-dimensional, but you start to kind of play with things like 3 dimensions of layers that he starts to play with posing, form, and the way lines start to wrap around structure. Now, of course, because of the really thick line work of the brush, it does make it feel a bit flatter in some cases. But internally, there are really, really, really fun stuff here when he does with the lines. And I start to pick up on these small things. What I want to do today as a demo is how I look at someone like Hokusai, especially when it comes to things that I'm very much connected to, how I wanted to translate stuff over to the stuff I want to do. I don't want to draw this stuff. I don't want to draw like him, but I want to use elements of what he does offer that I can use to incorporate as a means of communicating something of surface information or form or 3 dimensions or even just aesthetics of hatching. So Hokusai, I kind of gave me that information from years ago, and it was more of a first a visual connection that I saw. It's like, okay, I thought there were some really great lines. These particular things right here is what caught my attention in this. This stuff with the patterns, where the little like leaf-like shapes that come into it. These brush strokes are very spirally, and they kind of radiate in directions of kind of orbs or circles, and it patterns around. But then he also uses hatching lines that goes in this very kind of flowy movements into the shape. So these parts I really find aesthetically pleasing and very attractive. So I would like to be able to use this more, and I've done it already slightly in some sketches in my accordion book earlier, but I want to use this more today to kind of maybe explore some kind of like dragon, demon, creature-esque kind of thing, and maybe see if I can kind of bring that kind of stuff into it as well. This idea of maybe being able to also creatively mix things together in some ways, who knows, we'll see. Like I said, what I'm going to draw today, I don't know exactly just yet, but these are some forms of inspiration looking at, especially when it comes with line work, not so much his subject matter. Of course, being creature oriented, it can still pull from this directly. But like I said, it repeats over and over and over again. There are hundreds of pages in this book, which are just essentially the same kind of iterations and topics and characters, especially like the lion character, which is used a lot. So this book I found very, very awesome. I don't know the title of it. It's in Japanese again. Like I said, here's the cover again for those of you looking. This is Hokusai. For people that are joining in right now, again, you guys will know who Hokusai is because of his famous wave prints that he's done in the past. You guys all know this particular image, but his drawing work, and you will find a lot of other mangas that aren't necessarily like his creations of things. Like these are stuff he's obviously generating from his imagination or from traditional like mythology or cultural elements of things. But he's done a lot of ink work where he studies of even observation. He'll study things like people, animals, insects, landscapes, birds, and he would draw them a lot of times from life. He would produce pages and pages of this stuff, which back in the times he sold them. He sold them for small pocket change and stuff like that, and they called them mangas. Just random drawings is what the title of that name is. And there are some really, really beautiful processes as well too. Like that kind of work I've never seen printed in a booklet. I've only seen them available on like Google like images or in like kind of situations. But there are literal pages where he'll show not only the final image, but how he started with the shape link to get to this point. For some reason, I kind of remember him maybe even having something like that in here, maybe, but maybe not. It does go into more of his woodblock print later on. So here, some of it has kind of like smaller mangas, which he studied characters and people. They're really, really interesting and beautiful. Like this whole series is just him illustrating people that were artists. So they were like painters. There's like a really funny one over here where the guy's actually painting with all of his limbs in his mouth right here. This kind of stuff reminds me of even stuff that people that talk about today, even like stuff like this, where this guy's like painting and some kind of horse is coming out of it. Really, really amazing topics. So, have I heard of the lock-on print book created by Lost in Cult? I have not, Greedy Thunder. I'll try to look it up later on if I can. Lost in Cult. I'll try to remember that. But he has these really great little spot art pieces like this too. This guy's just painting on a wall. And it kind of reminds me of like artists like today, guys like Carl and Kim Jong Gi and all these other people that kind of do the same thing. And again, we're talking about Hokusai, who's around a very long time ago, hundreds of years ago. And so he would make these really amazing little books, but there were some that were very educationally valuable. So when I found them, I was like, man, that's a direct connection to what I teach right now in my dynamic sketching class. So expensive is saying, not sure if it's intentional, but the pieces I have displayed at the restaurant here in Pasadena called Osawa reminds me a lot of the Hokusai sketches. And I would say there wasn't a direct connection in terms of me looking at his work, but of course, being very kind of Asian oriented, woodblock print, ink brush styling, yeah, for sure, there's gonna be a lot of connection there. And also a lot of like Chinese, traditional art as well, and also Korean. Then he went to really a lot of like landscape stuff. And this is where most of his stuff became a lot more famous and popular, where most people today know of his stuff. But there's a section of time in which he was primarily sketching and drawing with pages like this, filling them up like that. So yeah, they were really, really amazing. Let's see if there was maybe a shot that in here that I thought I saw had a page that incorporated that sense of process breakdown. Let me excuse me as I kind of flip through this real fast again. There's some beautiful prints in here. Some nice work. Like I said, this is a Hokusai book. I don't know the name of the title of the book. It's all in Japanese. It just says Hokusai. I think this is from a collection from the Kyushu National Museum. And this is the cover. If anybody's looking for it, this is what you're looking for. Evan, how's it going, man? In terms of Piper and others, yeah, they're great. Piper, my cat, she's right under my feet at the moment. She's getting old. She's about 12 years old now, and she's losing weight. I'm trying to get her to gain more weight and feed her more. I think she's having some dental issues. I gotta extract some teeth out of her. My old cat, basically, talking about. Anyways, we're talking about the studies from these particular line studies that I liked a lot. Just keep in mind of what you looked at over here. I'll bring it back once in a while as more people join in. You can kind of see what I'm pulling from and why we're drawing what we're drawing. Like I said, I'm gonna do some kind of you know what? I love this image back here of him illustrating people that are also drawing other things. I like this image a lot. And I might generate something of my own in a similar vein to this. We might have a character kind of on the ground painting something and something is emerging from that piece. I might actually produce something that is in similar vein to kind of honor and celebrate the stuff that we're looking at now from Hokusai as a inspiration. Okay? We're gonna keep that page right there kind of like marked. So bookmark in here for that. I'm gonna bookmark these pages also. So we'll keep those bookmarked for now, and we'll bring it back up. To do this, I'm gonna just straight sketch into my sketchbook that I have. Now, you guys remember some of the stuff we did already in the past. This is that work piece that I've done. This is a sketch I just did last night. I was watching a documentary on Sergio, the not the director, not Leone, but the other one that produced a lot of the Django movies, and the actor of Frank Nero was being part of that. So I did a study. I was watching that last night. So we're gonna go straight into the sketchbook, and we'll keep it there in terms of the distance for now. That keeps it here to about there. I want my window to be shifted a little bit more to the left visual, and I'm gonna use my my Pentel brush pen. The Pentel brush pen over here is the one with the gray transparent cap. So it does have a very thin brush onto it. I also have another type, which is the Pentel brush pen, which has the same gray handle, but with a black cap. And this one's a medium tip. So we're not going to use this one right now. We're just going to use a thin brush. And I'll use maybe some other brush pens to help kind of drop in some dark if I need to. The book that we are looking at was, it just says Hokusai. Yeah. There's no English title. You can look it up later on. I'll bring it back into it later on here. But like I said, what we're going to sketch right now is some individual person, possibly kneeling down with his body over a kind of rice paper canvas, and he's sketching and drawing with a brush. I want something to emerge from it, and which direction I'm going to go into. I'm going to have it kind of spiral around like this direction, maybe even like coming back towards him. I might start off with things like those kind of lion-like creatures and dragons and stuff like that emerge into other kind of things I just kind of generate and create, birds and stuff like that. We'll see where it goes. I'm trying to think if I should even do it like horizontally like this instead. That would be better. That'd be better. Okay, Carson's asking, have I ever looked at Michael Hampton's anatomy book? No, I have not. I know Michael Hampton. I don't really know much of his stuff. I haven't taken a class on his things in the past, but like I said, many students in the past have obviously have taken those things. I myself have not. So I don't really necessarily have a recommendation towards his booklets in terms of Hampton's work. I hear it's great, but I haven't really looked at it. Why? There's so many other artists, you know. I have nothing against it, and I'll definitely take a look at it at some point in the future. Let's see. So, a good question over here from Expensive is how do you any tips on how to lay things out aesthetically pleasing on a sketch page? Well, before we begin here, if you were to study things, let's say based on numerous subject or a single subject, have multiple sketches and study. What I recommend for people in my classes is to think about things in sections or blocks. So to kind of give you an idea, the paper here. Just use one of these brown tone sketch papers. I'll get to your question in just a moment, typical junk. So in terms of, let's say, if I have a sketch page, if I was to study, let's say, like a bird, the idea is that no matter how you want to block it, it can be blocked down into 3 sections, basically. Give it kind of like in blocks right now of threes. We have 1 here, 2 here, 3. The organization of these blocks can vary any way you want to. You can have 1 up here, or 1 over here, or 1 in the middle, and then 2 could be somewhere off to the side, above or below, but it's grouped in different sections. Now the scale of it can also alter and change. You can have a thinner section of 1 or a larger area of 1, whatever you want it to be based on that. The sections of these blocks kind of more based on intention as to what I want to draw. So if I'm going to draw a bird, let's say I'm doing some kind of animal or something like that, I'll do a bunch of like side views of animals and stuff like that, just to study the proportions, the forms, posing, whatever the case is. And I'll do numerous studies of this animal things. Again, these are just crude little sketches. So it gives me a sense of exploration. Then number 2, what I'll do is kind of refine those, making them a little bit more specifically sizing, more in detail, maybe in like extractions of like heads, if it's like a flamingo or something like that. And then it'd be like extract the eye, details of things like that in there, or I'll kind of draw out the bill, get the 3 dimensions of the forms in that place. So this section over here in 2 is kind of refining and also calling things out in specifics. And number 3, I'll think about like a larger sense of like maybe you have a scene with the flamingo in here, and then we have it inside the water, kind of standing in there with and stuff like that, right? Maybe like other birds in the background, maybe the cases. But the sections now are kind of blocked out in like this. So this, if without these borders, take them out, essentially, right? And so the pages are still locked in terms, not pages, but the layout is locked in terms of what is what and what my intentions are behind it. So each time I study a brand new kind of subject, I can organize these blocks the way I want to. Now, you don't always have to go by 3. You can go by like 1 and 2, or you can go with just 1 with 1 sketch in the entire thing. And then the way you vary it, as you go through your pages of sketchbooks, you can try some that are 2 blocks, 1 block, 3 block, and you alternate as you go, and think about the intention as to like what you're trying to do with the subject matter itself. So this is a typical kind of thing that I'll do with my art center, but classes in general. I think I talk to people about how you can really incorporate and maximize the page. So things like overlaps can be done, scale changes of like front to back, smaller pieces or larger pieces, pushing things like detail and rendering to 1 piece. Everything else can be really simple. So it really helps you maximize the page overall. Just a recommendation, but this is like to do things on my own. Actually, I wonder if I have that one sketchbook over here. Like it. I thought I did. I have a sketchbook that has a lot of that exploration of laying things out in particular. I don't want to spend all the time looking for it. So either way, typical junk in terms of the, I guess, good schools or within concept art in the East Coast, anything close to New York City. In that area of Virginia, not so much that I know of. The only school that's a college or creative kind of like industrial focused kind of education might be RISD, but that's mostly like kind of industrial design, maybe architecture. I don't know if they have an illustration program out there. Not a lot of concept art from my understanding. I think they have a game division, maybe. So you might want to look at that RISD, Rhode Island School of Art and Design. From Rhode Island, there's also the one in Georgia, which is a bit south from you, but it's close. So that's SCAD. Savannah College of Art is a relatively strong place, mostly for animation and biz dev work. And there's of course all the way down south to Florida, which is Ringling School. Ringling is, I think, on the Tampa side of things. And I've had some students come from there to the West Side just to come take classes with me at CDA. And there's some pretty good people that came out of there, and also from SCAT as well too. But those are three different schools that have different focuses of either design, animation, or things like illustration and concept art, which Ringling does do. So on the East Coast, those are the three schools that I would be looking at specifically. Of course, on the West Coast, there are numerous others. In the Midwest and East, there's really not that much going on. There might be a couple things in Milwaukee, in Chicago. I believe there might be a couple things maybe in, I was about to say in Texas, but I can't remember if there was one or not. But of course, a bit of research you have to kind of find and look around, right? You can go up north towards Canada, and that's where you're going to find Syn Studio, SYN. That's up in Montreal area. That's directly north to you. That's in Canada, So, you can be looking around and see where you want to go. But the best thing to do, of course, is maybe find somewhere close in vicinity and maybe experience a little bit of it. Get as much education as you can, then kind of go online and look for more stuff if you can't travel so much. Okay, like I said, we're gonna start off with the guy over here, on his knees, kind of on the ground plane. I'm just gonna make up this look of the character. You know what? Before I do that, I want to make sure this brush pen is kind of wiped off with excess ink. It gets a little bit heavy in flow, so I just want to make sure we got a nice even steadiness. So the brush pen we're using right now is the Pentel color brush pen. This is a thin brush version. Start right down here. I'm wondering if I want his back shot instead. We'll do the back. Right now, I just want to set the scale. Because I'm making up, this character from whatever culture or styling that I want to, and design his costume the way I want. Imagining him rolled up in his sleeves. Belt around this direction. Here with a top knot. And preemptively, I'm also going to already incorporate some of that kind of hatching, indicative styling that Hokusai was doing, even into this character alone. About 79 people right now, so this might actually be a good time to kind of introduce to you guys as to what I'm doing right now. What we're doing at the moment is that I introduced this book. Later on, if you guys are a part of the subscription, you can rewatch the video again. But I talk a lot about this particular book being inspiration. This is from Hokusai. And this book that I found at a Japanese bookstore was kind of a lot of great information on obviously his woodblock stuff, but I found a lot of great sketches internally that really gave me some inspiration about how he uses ink and line work, especially his hatching methods is what I'm really picking up on this here. So I'm looking at stuff like this here, inside the creatures, but also inside the areas of hatching like there. Those are things I'm going to bring and emanate into my sketch today. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm going to be talking about artist inspirations going into the future for the Lightbox Expo. And I'll be doing this with a sit down with Marshall Vandroff. And Hokusai will be one of the individuals I'll be bringing up as a subject to talk about. I kind of want to do it preemptively here online, not only just to talk about it, but to kind of practice on it a bit, to explore specifically, what we're going to discuss. Because it's one thing to actually just talk about these kind of inspirational people that you can hear a lot of artists do, but then you rarely ever get to really actually see them use it. Well, okay, you can talk about people you really like and why you like them, but how do you physically, literally use that stuff? So here, I just wanted to show that where I'm taking literally a Hokusai's work, looking at that as inspiration. Sometimes it's a little bit of a direct connection based on his lines, his subject matter as well too, but then I'm trying to twist and play with it to kind of generate my own thing. So if you ever want to do your own study on artists that you enjoy, the idea is to also look at artists that you like, study them, extract information, not to do a one-to-one copy, which can also be good, but also to experiment with ideas of how do I take that information and play with it myself. Buddha is asking, am I planning to hold a stream where you are customizing sneakers? I've done it in the past. I haven't done it in a while. But, if people are interested in the future, I certainly don't mind doing it. It kind of depends on what I would need to be doing. Because if I'm going to stream it, I'd probably want to do a pair that I can actually do a lot more artwork on top of instead of a paint colorway. But it depends. If I have a pair I can do that with, I'll consider it. But I do a lot, I will record them and I'll post them up on certain things. But like I said, if anybody's really interested, just and I'll try to consider it. His arm's gonna be covered up already. Same thing when trying to move hatching lines around certain ways. So I looked at Hokusai's work, his line work. I was like, man, the way he hatches, it kind of reminded me a lot of graphic novelists today. From like Mobius to Katsuya Terada, who Terada also pulls from Mobius, and I'm sure Terada does look at Hokusai as well. I wouldn't be surprised, especially a lot of the Japanese artists kind of growing up for youth and seeing some of these traditional artists kind of using it their own way. And so that really I pulled my attention, especially the way he would hatch in these kind of rotational directions over here. I'm gonna have him on his knees. I'm gonna have a piece of clothing and costume coming down. The idea, of course, in this is being very mindful of my brushstrokes. I want to concentrate areas of details in certain regions where shadows might go. The areas of where light might hit, maybe come this direction. All this stuff I want to leave open. I want to over detail it. I don't want to over put down line and strokes. With a brush pen like this one over here, it can become very quickly messy and stroke heavy. A bit specific about how much strokes you put down the line needs to be carefully thought about. Of course, while you're doing it, it can be difficult to pay attention to it. That's where the practice comes in. Basically, yes, voodoo bazooka. That's the idea. So the ideas of where I put texture, hatching, details of surface. As light comes in from a certain direction on the contrasting side in the areas of form shadow or cast shadow, I'll input that information. Again, we're not painting right now, so we can't control edges of as easily as we can with like paint. We can obviously generate hatch marks to show soft edges and hard edges, but even then it can be producing a lot of hatching lines, which can be very busy and noisy. So as we use a brush pen like this one also here, it becomes extremely heavy-handed. So we do have to be careful of how much we place in. So the location being placed in has to be very well selected, but we use the idea of light and shadow for that. But the idea behind this is that this isn't necessarily so based on logic, because if we're going based on strictly logic, the idea of light and shadow should be then incorporated in a more realistic sense as we observe it in the real world. But this being a stylistic approach, we're not bound by the rules of the world. We understand them as a basis of understanding to kind of establish foundation, but we can then play with it creatively, design-wise, to express in certain ways that we want to. That will really help free up a lot of people, because in the beginning you're so bound by the idea of like anatomy, perspective, lighting and value, structure and form, and so you feel so constricted by that action of technique that you're unable to just express. So of course you want to explore those foundations to a very high degree, and so that you have the ability to then explore them the way you want to. So here, as I have those basic understandings, I can then kind of openly move things around. But what we're talking about right now, as Voodoo is saying, is that this is actually one of the most difficult things when it comes to drawing. It's about knowing where to place information and not place information. And I think the mastership when it comes to something like draftsmanship is about being able to understand how much not to draw, which is very difficult to do because I overdo things. I tend to overdraw stuff, too much line, too many darks, high contrast stuff. I make a lot of noise, but I fall into that trap all the time myself because I'm not mastering this kind of stuff. So learning as I go along, and there are people out there that can do it way better than me. But the idea is I know it well enough to be aware of it. So if in those situations where it pops up where it's like, it didn't go so well, I can learn from that. I don't feel bad by it, but I understand what I can do to kind of do a better job afterwards. Sometimes the idea of being able to repeat by drawing it again is something I would recommend. Here, I don't think I missed any studio questions, but I hope I answered everything. If anybody has any other questions, let me know. At this early period of the sketch, it does require just a little bit more concentration. Just make sure that the established placement, angle, scale is kind of there. If not, I need to really think about problem solving it and looking for ways to adapt the piece. So far, I think it looks. I'm gonna place in things like holes, bins and stuff like that next to it, and stuff sticking out. I'm imagining this artist is also sketching, all these different kind of tool sets. Imagine him also having like rolls of like this piece he's drawing on. He's actually going to be literally on top of. Watch out, because I've got ink on my hands. It's going to smudge all over the place. I find it extremely difficult to shift from canvas, paper, or digital to a complex surface like sneakers. Yeah, it can be tough, especially if you don't have a large area of space to work on. Am I using any references right now? No, I'm not. Yes, I am. I'm inspired by some of the stuff from Hokusai's work. As I said, there was a piece in here that I'm using as a memory of experience that I saw, and I like the subject matter of. But in terms of what I'm generating right now, it's just out of my head. I have something coming off of the page. I haven't drawn with these kind of brush pens in a long time, actually. I did a couple of demos in classes in the last couple of weeks using dry brush techniques, but it's a little bit of a different approach with those brush pens that I would do. But in terms of strictly using it like more like a drawing tool like this one here, it's been a while, especially when it comes to like live streaming or personal sketches. Ink that I'm using right now is also the platinum carbon ink, this one here. So I refill these brush pens with this kind of ink here. So going with extensive internet censorship been around, man, good luck out there. I know it's been kind of crazy and unfortunate to see a lot of the women suffering over there. I have a lot of friends and families who are actually Iranian in Persian, so seeing that happening right now is very unfortunate. And all support to them as well too, in terms of hopefully getting through it, given the rights. Version of this piece, and we'll have like the head of something over here. I think I want to generate kind of a creature that's similar to the stuff from the book over here on this side. We'll do some kind of head popping up. This, and I'll try creating larger pieces as it comes out from that. Kind of looks like he's praising or maybe praying to this thing. But I'll have like really big brushes and stuff that kind of like further communicates the ink and brushes. Your brain's asking, am my eyes often darting back and forth between where am I drawing and where other areas of the drawings are? You find it helpful not to not exactly look where I'm drawing, at least for sketching. Yeah, it does tend to do that. Other times I'll be drawing over here and I'll kind of look back over here on this side, and I also jump around quite a bit when I'm sketching. I'll work on a couple pieces on this end, I'll jump over here somewhere else. So I don't tend to stick with one area and work on that piece over and over, to the extent of like degree of what polish or finish might be. I do, definitely hit multiple sections of pieces. So I jump quite a bit. Am I doing anything for Inktober? Nah, I haven't done anything for that for years. Back when I used to, I wouldn't do it traditionally with the way people do it now. What I used to do with everything with the left hand, so I called it leftover. So I would draw with my left hand for a month, and I used to produce pretty good sketches with my left hand. I'm not ambidextrous; I'm right hand dominant, but I would sketch with my left, just for the challenge, just for the practice. It's gonna be some kind of, like I said, lion head, kind of more traditional ways of what Hokusai was doing. And this isn't about trying to make it like a realistic looking creature. I'm doing it something a bit more graphical, or the brush pen kind of movement oriented. Horns, ears. Again, to show you guys what I'm looking at is this book here, the Hokusai book. Some of the pieces inside again. I look through the pages once in a while, just to kind of stop for a moment to observe, see what he's done, and pull from the inspirations of the stuff he's drawn. And that's what this demo is about. Trying to see how much I can really pull together from that. All artists have done this in the past, and all artists, in my opinion, should keep doing this. The idea of looking for inspirations, extracting, technical information to visual inspiration of subject matter and topics, especially when it comes to the idea of like training or practicing. For your professional work and stuff like that, obviously is derived for the project in terms of what you need to produce. But for stuff like this, like I said, it's really easy to kind of get into. And spending an hour, a day just like sketching and drawing and things that you feel like, it becomes a bit difficult to sit and always work, especially like homework stuff. So to be able to just sit and also like kind of not mindlessly, but definitely have a little bit more of some of the information curated to knowing what you need to do makes it a little bit less strenuous. Looking for his patterns, the way he does his line work. I love this kind of star-like hatching that he does. I really want to be able to bring that in a bit more. That's one of my main things I want to extract from his pieces right now. Being able to practice that and making it more of a natural element to my work as well. Hatching method that he does. Let's see. Another question from Jim Lim. Is there any difference between Ola markers and Copic markers? Well, I do have the Ola markers over here. So these are Ola markers currently. And the main difference, of course, is the fact that these markers can be actually taken apart in halves. One half is a chisel tip, one half is a brush tip. So here's a chisel tip, and this is the brush tip. So if I wanted to, let's say I have a collection of certain marker values or color saturations I'm using, I can then take the pen markers that I would want to. Let's say I'm using this cool, and then I'm going to use this blue. So instead of like using two different markers, I can just have these put together. I can uncap them and go flip them back and forth if I want to. So it makes it a little bit easier to use and carry. One of these markers here, the small ones, is equivalent to one Copic. So it's much more compact and also much more, there's more flow and evenness to the actual pressure from the cartridge inside. The ink flow actually is quite consistent, all the way to the point where it dries out. It's not refillable just yet. I know the Copics are, but the Copics also, the refill situation, it's good, but the problem is it wastes a lot of the ink because it dries out real fast. So I've always had to like refill Copics constantly because it wouldn't maintain the saturation of ink it would hold inside of its cartridge in the felt. But that system is a bit different. It uses like a piston system on the inside, so it's enclosed and airtight. So it then forces through pressure the ink all the way through. If they can find a way to refill these things, it'd be really, really handy. But so far I've been using it, lasts a long time. So, but other than that, I think just quality wise, they're great. They're being a small business as well too. The people that started it originally came from Copic, and they kind of started their own market brand, so they kind of are now a small business. Because of it, they have a little bit more of a small business mentality, right? Which is more about customer kind of like connections, help, and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's also really nice to have. Where Copic, you're not really going to get a lot of connection. I'm talking about Olo, by the way. Olo being a small kind of business, Copic being big, you're not really going to talk to them a lot. Like for instance, one of the weak points in the Olo marker was that little connector in between these markers. It bends, disconnects easily. So they actually redesigned this thing on the internal coupling, and so they redesigned it, and they're sending out a bunch of free ones to people who bought the markers, just so they can get the updated version of it. That was a weak point. So they listened to their customer feedback, and not only do they act on it, but they also back to them. And that's the problem with like a big one like Copic, is that they're too big, and in terms of even professional artists giving them feedback, will they really listen to it? I don't know. Like Copic used to make those really big fat markers. They don't make them anymore, and those were my favorite markers from Copic because they don't even use them. I don't like to use the regular Copic markers, honestly. They're all right, but I always like the big fat tips, chiseled tips. Going back into the hatching a little bit here. I have more coming out this direction all the way around. A couple of questions over as well. Jello Spirit asks, "Have I seen Cyberpunk 2022?" I mean, assuming you're talking about 2077, and then also the Edge Runners show. Yes, I have, and I thought it was great. It's a good anime. I was a bit concerned at the beginning when they first announced it from Trigger, which I liked their work a lot, but I thought they killed it. They did a really good job. The story was well encapsulated, and I like the fact that they ended it that way. And another question is, any suggestions on how to overcome laziness? For one thing, I would say getting out of your room. We have a suggestion here from the Hellwig, which is for you started going to the gym and going out there and talking to people about the experiences and community helped you a lot. So yeah, for me, I would agree with that. Stepping outside your door, venturing out, because if you're able to get your mind from the distractions of things around your house, let's say you go to like a cafe or to like a local eatery or bar or diner, hang out there for a little bit and sketch and draw for an hour or two. At least you'll stay focused because you go there for the intention of doing so. If you're at home, you can sit and try to do the thing, but then you're like something else you have to do, right? Kind of walk off. But also like trying to get up and just start, right? You're on your couch, maybe you're playing games or watching a movie or you're on your phone, and it gets really hard to just initiate response of it. So stepping outside of that zone, I think, would be wise. From there, finding right people, good people that are like-minded, that want to sketch and draw with you. That's going to set up, kind of like meetups, sketch groups, stuff, which I would say is a huge benefit in what I was able to do to kind of grow as well too. When I was in high school, I had a friend that I used to meet up with all the time. We'd go sketch and draw at a diner. It was kind of a regular thing that we did all the time. Just have to go this direction. This time I'm going to have It's a spiraling kind of approach with the does a lot. It's going to be an arm structure. All those like air and flame like shapes, strokes of lines that Hokusai does. And this particular creature is going to also be looking towards the viewer or towards the artist. Down there. And using all that hatching and then dark indications to kind of help tie everything together. This is that indication that he does on the surface a lot of these animals. Really just kind of fell in love with. In my youth, I never really used Hokusai as an inspiration. When I was a student at like art center or in college, again, it was like an awareness that he existed as a woodblock artist. But as a student, I never looked at his work as a form of practice. Kevin, no, they don't make the huge chisel tips anymore from Copic. I'll be saying you don't know how to create a training program for drawing though. Well, this is where you would like sit in on a class. Take classes online. You can do the streaming ones. It could be like the tutorial based types. You may have not pay for the full class, but even I offer classes that are sit in positions that are like what 150 for an 8-week session, which is honestly, if you think that's too expensive, then consider how your finances and budgets are going. Age of May is saying, how is this possible? You're saying like, using the construction, spending 10 times as much time. You're saying it's hopeless. Well, that's the thing is like, the only difference between you and me when it comes to stuff like this is time. This is what I tell all my students. The only thing that separates between all of you guys who are experienced as well too in different levels of drawing and skill sets, and some of you out there may actually be drawing better than me, but others might feel like you're not. You might think that it's hopeless for me to get to where you are. But that mentality is really not what you want to have, because as you have to understand, again, as I said, the only thing that separates between you and me then is that distance of time and experience. I've been doing this since the age of 5, but I've been drawing professionally for over 15, 20 years. So for me, if you're saying that I want to be able to get to where you are right now, but I've only been drawing for like 2 or 3 years, how do you expect to compress 15, 20 years of experience into those 2 or 3 years, right? So for you, it would seem hopeless because it's not very realistic. So the idea is understanding your parallel, or at least the what's next to you in terms of what's going forward as people that you grew up with, drawing and artist wise, students, other people that you're working in tandem together. But you wouldn't necessarily have to look at people like on social media who might have that level of experience and think that I'm not that right now. If you're saying, well, it's hopeless for me to get there, well, then that mentality is going to already kind of refrain from you actually having that. Is it possible? Sure. I mean, why wouldn't it be? Right? In due time, in due experience, there's no reason why someone here wouldn't be able to get to the same levels of skill set as you are seeing here and beyond, right? So, and so how do I initiate that? Well, there's many things you could be doing, and there's no one answer. I don't know that path. I don't know the answer for you. But as you try and attempt it through your use of curiosity and looking for a certain example, of course, looking for classes, looking for the right people, going to shows, going to conventions, or gallery shows or events or something like that, and then searching for everything as much as you can through books and internet things, people you can connect to and draw with. Then give it that time, give it that mileage, and let it kind of grow and curate over time within that. But you have to obviously have that hunger and discipline and interest level to the degree of obsession that is comparable to someone like me. So that's something that's to consider, right? Because I'm not necessarily more talented than you. I've just spent more time in this because I'm infatuated by this stuff. That's all it is. Being mindful, like what I touch, because I'm afraid this is like splotching everywhere. I want to grab another sheet. Sheet on top like that, so that way my hand doesn't smudge a bunch of stuff. Jello Spirit's asking, when you were writing The Blacksmith, did you have the whole story written down, or did you have only the pieces of the story that connected later on? For that particular book, it was just an idea, and I had to thumbnail and write it through multiple iterations of, samples, thumbnailing, really kind of blocking everything down based on construction of the pages, from the angles of the camera to the dialogue, all that kind of stuff. I spent months doing it like 2, 3 times, and I would adjust the pages from there. Did I write through like an actual script? I can't. I don't do that. I'm not a writer. So, but I would try to write the dialogue and structure through by actually sketching it out. Have I watched the new season of Primal? Yes, it was fantastic. I actually loved the way they ended it. Same thing like Cyberpunk. I actually really enjoy and celebrate risk taking in storytelling like that. Especially with the way when you have something that's a popular brand or something that's really kind of like fan favorites and you know uh, something that sells really well, and to do that to a character, which I'm not going to say what is happening in Primal, I won't spoil it, but based on what they did, most people would say that was a bad idea. You but I think it's great because it's within the idea of storytelling itself. And people can say, oh yeah, that you can obviously have different ways the story continues and stuff like that. True, obviously, and even if the series ended right there, I would have been happy with it because I enjoy really like self-contained worlds and stories, and I don't like it when they just like you know, treat it like a Frankenstein monster and shock it back to life every single time and bring it back over and over and over again. Which is why people don't respond to things like remakes very well. But they don't know also how to end something. It just kind of like grinds like The Simpsons, right? They should have ended that years ago. Can I make more copies for the Dynamite Bible? There are copies available if you go to stewartingbooks.com. For the European distribution of Libre Distri, again, there are copies. It's just that they don't have them right now. They're traveling as well too. They're going to a bunch of this stuff in Europe happening right now, in Paris and Poland. So they're not actually available to even get copies at the moment. Hopefully, in the future, at the end of the year, they'll have some. Question is, if someone asked me to do like a tattoo cover up but for shoes, the original art was done by someone you knew, would I do it? um I mean, if that's what the client wants, I don't see why not. It's their property. That's what they're paying for. So if you're saying, but it was a friend's artwork, like I'll tell him, I'll tell my friends, like, hey, by the way, this guy wants me to draw over your stuff. uh I would find it kind of funny. But no, I would have no problem with that if the person again, like I said, if they hired me for that. But would I take it on? I don't really do that kind of work. I don't really take a lot of client commission work. I only do that kind of stuff at shows, Comic Cons, and expos. But at home, I do mostly teaching and freelance work for businesses and clients. I don't do a lot of personal commission work. So even if they asked, not to say I would be against it, it's just that I wouldn't necessarily even take it. It's something I gotta do. Then I'm going to turn this into something a bit more dragon-like, maybe bird-like. We'll have fun with some of the creatures being a little bit more mixed, hybrid, creative. Right now, most of these kind of creatures I'm being inspired by more of what Hokusai does. So they're kind of a little bit more in similarity to look and styling. If there's a couple questions here. Korzukan is asking, saying that you're a perfectionist, as most artists usually are naturally, right? Your art teacher told you that your work wasn't good, and because you spend too much time. In what context, I'm not sure. If he's saying you spend too much time on the piece, or if you spend too much time on something else, and not really spending as much time as you should be in art, regardless of whatever the feedback was, I don't think it's necessarily a proper feedback to tell your work wasn't good. You can say there's something wrong with it in terms of some of the techniques and elements of approaches to fundamentals, but then obviously the conversation that goes into, well, what this is what you could be doing to get things better. But if someone just says like, hey, your stuff is not good, spend more time, then it's like, what do you do with that information, right? And this is not just from like some regular person. So if that was a case of like someone online saying that, then whatever, I don't know that person, who cares, right? But if it's someone like an art teacher, then I wouldn't say that's very appropriate. And sorry that you had that. I wish there were a bit more committed individuals in the field of education. And not to say that there aren't, there are many of them, but the ones that don't necessarily give it due attention, it does affect people. It's not to say that the instructor has to be the one to save people, but what they say lasts, it stays with them. Tiger Claw is asking, how does it feel to be in the top 1% of streamers in Twitch? I don't actually even know what that means. uh, in top 1% of, in what sense? It's like people that are really famous or something like that. I don't am. I don't even think this Twitch stream is really even regarded with a lot of attention because I only have 100 people in here. So, and 100 people seem like a lot, but it's like, compared to what you're maybe saying, it's like, well, isn't a successful stream based on the number of people or is it based on the quality of the content? Weigh the judgment down there. Why do I do this? Because it's fun. I'm going to draw anyways. So I like to share. I like to connect. And my main form of work is teaching anyways. So if I can show examples of things I do and talk about, would that attract people to maybe take more of my classes? So is it somewhat of a marketing and business kind of element? Sure, of course. So it's not like I just do this out of accident or by like, oh, I guess I'll just do it randomly. Of course, there's purpose and intention to some degree, but it doesn't mean I'm doing this in some ways to kind of influence people in wrong directions. I'm not saying you have to take my classes. I'm not saying you have to, pay me for that kind of thing at all either. And these are free. You can watch it anytime you want to. Well, not all the time, but you can be here live. Um, but yeah, let me see some additional questions. Super function is saying I think it's too easy to get stuck in habits. I'm always way too focused on trying to draw in one single style, and I think it's really holding you back. Well, first, just the fact that you're looking for a style is what's holding you back. Look for more techniques and fundamentals, right? The basics within being able to actually construct form, proportions, perspectives, line, quality of things based on the technical tool sets and understanding of them through exercises. Now you're saying, well, isn't that a style? No, technique is not a style. Technique is a tool set you would use to problem solve things. Style is attached to things like products and storytelling, and being able to produce a certain visual look that attracts a certain market. But technique is a form of you to use as a tool set to help apply it to those styles. So Ahmed is asking, I am doing kind of a master study. I'm looking at Hokusai's work as inspiration for this, as we have this image here right now. So it does pull from a lot of his aesthetics and stylings, especially with his line work, his hatching, and his incorporating details and subject matter. So his question then continues: are you doing a master artist copying as a study? Can you break down the steps? I copy demos from instructors. I learned something or grasp the principles, but should I copy the same work more than one time to be able to make it your own? For example, organic complex form. So I would say in the beginning, for someone who's like starting to learn and educate themselves, studying and copying someone's work in the beginning one-to-one, which is an exact translation for what you're seeing, is appropriate because you're trying to learn how that person may have done something, right? So you try to get it as close as possible so you can match up to things like line quality, theme and subject, form, objects of whatever the case may be, of techniques. And so you kind of re-engineer it backwards, trying to think about what that person may have done. So you don't try to only look for the way it looks visually, but also think about how did that person move? Which direction did they go? How much pressure did they put down? What kind of tool were they even using? That question of like, what pen are they going for? I know it's a very cliche and common question, but it's a legitimate one, especially when you're doing copies of other artists' work. But from that copy, it does has to then emerge and evolve into not a direct copy anymore, but more of an inspiration to pull information and visuals together to be able to formulate your own imagery work and still resemble their styling, but it's your own creation. But then from there, eventually, as you hybrid other artists' work, right now I'm looking at Hokusai. Maybe I'll then look at things like Sergio Topi, then I'll look at someone like Heinrich Clay, or Charles Dana Gibson, or Leyendecker, whatever the case is. And I'll pull elements from all those individual people. I'll create an amalgamation, a stew of all those artists, and I'll mix them together, throw in my own intentions of aesthetics, things that I like, curated by things I've experienced over the years, and I then am able to express them onto the page based on the subject of what I want to actually produce. So then I have a certain styling I want to capture for, let's say, a thing I'm trying to illustrate or make a comic for. I'll look for insertional things by producing many sketches and drawings, and I start to find and hone in on what I like, right? It still resembles certain other people's things, but because you're being able to mix and match so many different stuff, it becomes a unique take. It's not about originality, it's about being able to actually understand how to migrate that stuff together to become your voice into it. You don't say it's your voice, you're saying it's inspiration that pulls from the things that we experience. Does anybody have an actual original styling? I mean, we can probably argue that, but for me, I would say that it's very much possible. But the majority of artists and people in our industry of like comics and animation and games are going to pull from the generation before, from the classical periods to the even the recent times. So that's the way I think it will kind of work. I hope you understood what I'm saying. Buho Buho is saying about the Primal Season 2 felt a bit rushed. I can understand that because it was pretty jarring and immediate. I wish it was a little bit more maybe expanded, especially in terms of the way they were going to end it. I wouldn't mind if there was an extra season that went that ending conclusion. But at the same time, again, I'm not bothered by it. I'm gonna add a bit more to this, and I'll get back to some of the questions again in just a moment. As people are starting to join in again, as I said, what we're doing at the moment is I looked at this particular artist's work, which is Hokusai. This is a book that I bought a couple of weeks ago, and everybody knows his stuff from the woodblock prints he's done in the past. Kind of remind people of what's going on right now. Through this book that I found randomly, there was these really beautiful sketches inside where he does pen and ink work, and I found this to be a direct inspiration for things that I really enjoyed. I never looked at Hokusai's work when I was young, but I found this to be extremely beautiful line work. And of course, I know who Hokusai is, but I didn't realize until maybe a couple of years ago how much he drew in his youth. So I'm pulling from that inspiration to generate and show you how I extract information from there to generate my own pieces that imitates his styling. But I also then pick up on specific things that I really like to incorporate more to my own work later on. So especially in areas of how he details hatches, uses lines around. Those are the things I would pull from. Not so much his subject matter, not so much his shape language, but a lot of the stuff I really enjoyed was his hatching and his line work. That's what we're doing at the moment, is literally showing you how I, as someone who's also practiced that in my youth, and I still today I still like to do this. Looking at inspirations, artists from the classical periods, and artists that are also coming from a direction or a pathway that you wouldn't expect, because you don't imagine using Hokusai as inspiration if you're working in animation or things like graphic design, or entertainment design. But his work, being so woodblock and two-dimensional, you don't see the direct connection, but there are some things he was producing that I found a direct connection to the way I would draw. So I want to pull from that because I find his line work really pretty. And it's not to say I want to draw like him, but I want to be able to attain certain elements and calibers of quality that I liked about it to be able to integrate into what I already have. Let's see a couple of the questions here. RG Villain's asking, did I just get into archery? No, I did not. I've been playing with archery now for those last 2 years, kind of since when like the pandemic kind of happened and when everything kind of shut down. I've always been interested in archery, but I didn't really like step into that area of actually trying it until this last 2 years. So everybody understands like whole Mediterranean draw and European bows and longbows. So the one I'm using right now is a longbow that was custom made for me. But the last 2 years, I actually started more with Asian bows. Horse draw, thumb draw is what I use a lot, which I didn't really even know about until the last couple of years. Which may seem common understanding as most archers, but again, like I said, for me, I was very much a novice and a basic within it. And then also really learning about the history within Asian archery, especially like in Korea, because archery in Korea is such a big thing. And I didn't fully realize or comprehend the weight of it in terms of a cultural influence. So it really pulled me in, and I started researching a lot, tons of reading, a lot of like videos I was watching, and kind of going into tutorials and historical things, building bows, building arrows, from Asian cultures to also like Native American cultures. Here like in the U.S., a lot of the native tribes from the Comanche and all those amazing bows, and so that really pulled me in because I'm still a really big fan of tribal cultures, and I get enamored by their history and their I guess growth within human evolution. Many things that I pull and use towards my own work in a lot of ways. The archery stuff is definitely a recent thing in the last couple of years, but I've been playing with it now more and more. It's more for just personal recreation. I don't hunt. I don't go out to like I have a backyard just large enough so I can actually shoot. So it's more for just personal, physical kind of like getting out there, moving a little bit, and with the whole pandemic stuff when everybody was shut down, nobody went outside, but I had to get out, even if it's just outside my door. Yellow Spirit's asking, do I ever practice silhouette drawings and what is it used for? Oh, I mean, everybody knows what the silhouette studies are for, right? When it comes to the idea of design, you understand the silhouette is to create then a very recognizable, iconic silhouette for the character or whatever thing you're drawing or creating, vehicle, creatures, whatever the case might be. And it needs to be then recognizable as a silhouette stage to be able to respond to it, whether from an emotional level or to a storytelling level. As a recognizability, it also then applies towards things like branding. So shape language is associated to this. Shape, proportion, pushing is a big part. Now, if you don't know exactly how to explore silhouetting, then you kind of go through it because you expect yourself to. Everybody else is doing it, right? I'm doing a character design. Everybody's doing silhouettes, so I'll just do my own version too. That's the problem, is that if you don't understand the functionality of silhouette work, then of course you're just kind of doing it based on you observing others doing it and kind of imitating that stuff, but not really having control of a tool. So then taking more classes in design will really help you with that part. But when it comes to silhouetting, there are many different techniques and tools you can use, digital to pen, brushes, whatever the case is, marker. We used to just use marker back in the day, marker and pens. But the idea, again, is about being have a recognizable silhouette based on the character's function and storytelling and how they should be off the page. Um, Simple as that, but there's definitely a lot more levels to it, and can't necessarily go into every single aspect of it right now. But I would say that it's a normal functional process towards design within what we do in the industry. So silhouetting is highly important, highly useful, but the problem is people don't fully grasp it within a lot of things I'll see in like portfolios. It just seems they kind of do it based on habit and based on because it's what the trend is. Peter Tungpi is asking, is it worth focusing on a mannequin to practice figures from different angles? I'd actually use 3D models, Peter. Where? Go to sketchfab.com. Sketchfab. You can find then really primitive 3D models on just a web browser, move it in space, and find those typical angles. Or just go to like a website that has a lot of different kind of like shots and angles and photographs of models and draw from those. Mannequin's good too, but having a bit more, let's say, control of different angles and keeping them stationary in a lock kind of position of camera, but then also having a diversity of different kind of models as well. On top of that, I would still be using the mannequin. I'm just saying diversify your references. Okay, let's kind of push a bit more onto this right now. I want to keep moving to this bird on this side. Let me zoom out a little bit. Bring this bit back. Still want to bring in a little bit of influence of what Hokusai was doing. Some kind of bird over here. Now imagine this painter on the ground with a canvas generating something, and something is emerging from this with all these like different creatures and stuff. For people that don't know where this inspiration is coming from, again, I'll turn to the page that kind of shows you what this is. This is the book again, Hokusai, and it was this page right here. And there was a series of sketches that Hokusai would do, and there's a series that he did of artists and painters, and they would be drawing, and a lot of the stuff would like start to come to life like that. I love this idea. These come from little booklets he used to produce as a younger artist. I love that image of this artist holding 4 brushes or 5 brushes, 1 in the mouth, 2 in the hand, 2 in the feet. It kind of reminds me of those ridiculous videos of people doing like 5 drawings of portraits, and they're holding it with like left and right arm of their feet as well too, and they kind of time lapse it, and they kind of render this head in one single image. Kind of ridiculous, but it kind of reminds me of that image. Let's see. I'm gonna scroll down a little bit. Mega Mario is asking, is the good, the bad, and the ugly one of my favorite cowboy movies? Hey, John Albert. One of mine is obviously the Fantastic Trilogy, right? It's Full of Dollars, right? And that one, and also the other, Clint Eastwood, and of course, The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, by Sergio Leone, the Italian westerns. And they're great. I was actually watching a documentary on the other Sergio who made the Django films. And yeah, I love those quite a bit. I never really watched the older ones from like the 50s and 60s with like John Wayne, that kind of stuff, or like Gene Autry kind of thing. And they're in their own right really fun. But of course, the Italian westerns really kind of found that niche that really worked so well. And even some of the more modern day kind of westerns from like Tombstone to Unforgiven or work, even additional kind of you know like Eastwood films, I do enjoy. But in terms of Good, Bad, and Ugly, it's pretty unbeatable, honestly. I just love the fact that they use so much inspiration from other filmmakers like Akira Kurosawa. They're so inspired by Japanese filmmakers that they really incorporated it into the Western. So there was such a really great hybrid using certain time eras, but also film styling, and also just I don't know, the storytelling behind the characters were also really iconic. I felt it's a great film. Let's see, I want to keep reading through here a bit more. Bumblebee, Bumblebee. Do you post preliminary stream announcements anywhere on my social media? Instagram, Peterhanstyle. So on stories, I usually announce it there. Jello Spirit's asking a really interesting question, which is, what is the difference between illustration and concept design? That's a very good question, actually. Uh, I'll try to keep it brief, but I will answer that as best I can. So first, let's just say, what is design? Right? Let's start there first, and then we'll go into the idea of illustration. Um, Design in our field, okay, especially when it comes to things like entertainment design specifically, that goes into games, movies, animation, comics, whatever the case might be. Entertainment, which incorporates in storytelling. So, what is then design that goes into the entertainment design? The visual problem solving is what we're doing as designers. So we have a story idea, a written kind of format. It could be a script, it could be a couple of notes, it could be whatever the asset may be too. The asset of a character, or let's say a costume, or a weapon design, or vehicles. You have an asset list of things to create for that project. So as you're given those things as a written wording by the designer who can be writing all this lore and building this kind of world, The visual designer, you could be in that position, takes that information and is the first step into the problem solving. So design then is taking then a series of artistic techniques, drawing, painting, to understanding value, color, composition, right, shape and form, all those elements within illustration that we are trained traditionally in is then used as a tool set to help us problem solve those actual things that we have to generate to be placed into a product that can be sold and used for entertainment value for storytelling. So as designers also, you're usually working within a team of people. So you're working on, let's say, even if you're contract, even if you're working at home, you're still going to be working with an art director, with a client, somebody, peer, to work together to help produce a very uniform and consistent project or world of a story that is then being used for whatever medium it may be. So simply, a designer or concept designer is someone who's going to be problem solving and visual information that has to be curated for, let's say, whatever project you're working on. And then what do illustrators do? In terms of literal difference, the illustrator and the concept designer, the illustrator generates one single piece. That piece is the asset. You can have numerous things inside that illustration, characters and creatures and environments and vehicles and things that could be represented the stuff we see today, or you generate as a concept, as an illustration, because there are concept illustrators and concept designers also. So if we stay in the world of concept art, or let's say in entertainment art, illustration is also a form of a faction of how we can use our skill sets in the industry itself. But design also comes first. Okay, so design is problem solving again. Does that mean that we can't problem solve an illustration? Of course we could. We can thumbnail it, we can compose it, we can have many iterations with the, working with the client of the art director to find out what image they want to have, because the illustration can also storytell. So problem solving goes in there as well too. So elements of design start. So in terms of the outcome of it, the actual illustration is a single piece, and that is the actual asset you're generating to be either sold at a gallery, used within a concept illustration for, let's say, a movie. Production art can be done for things like that as well. Gives you a moment of a film or a script piece or whatever the case is. But the concept design of a character is a package of information that's then handed down to a series of individuals that can continue to roll to the production that needs to be generated for that, again, product. Let's say it's a 3D model that goes into a game. That game is being played as a first-person shooter or third-person action. That concept design you produce has to be then modeled, rigged, textured, animated. All that other stuff has to go through that whole process, and it goes through multiple hands. So a single design you can't say is yours. It's through a series of individual people and groups that is then massing all their skill sets to be able to put it into that medium. As an illustration, it's usually you and maybe a client, and you, the illustrator, are then generating all those things. The design piece of the actual earlier concepts of what that illustration is, by producing that illustration, then of course putting it out there, whether for print or for gallery shows or for concept illustration. But it's singular as it is, right? Those are the key differences of it. I don't know if that made sense, but I hope it did. Can a concept designer can also concept illustrate? Yes, they can. The idea behind this is that concept design comes first. You have to design something to understand what it is and how it is working in terms of the world you're generating, and then you would design the illustrations for that stuff afterward. Now, concept illustration can still come, but it's still regularly conceptual, which is just an idea as to what it could potentially be. But the design really starts to kind of flesh out those actual things in a more consistent nature of things that, as you produce multiple designs, works together in that project. But the conceptual illustration can still be very high concept. This is just, again, like I said, a possibility of the landscape or the character or lighting or color. It just gives the clients an idea visually as to what to potentially expect. But it would never be used as an actual piece to be put into, let's say, an actual game or movie. But the conceptual designer can take those illustrations also and then generate maybe solidified designs. So there's different ways of approaching it, but the idea, of course, always is that the conceptual designer is going to be someone who creates a series of things to help problem solve the actual asset, where an illustrator will generate one single image, which could be conceptual, but could also be the final asset itself. So I know it sounds confusing. I hope I didn't overcomplicate it. But by the way, these are also based on my opinions on what a conceptual designer and artist generally do. But do understand, again, the fact that I think those roles can overlap. One person can do both. Wordpick is asking, is that a fine or medium brush tip? This is a fine. I haven't seen that one with from Kim Jong-gi. But this concept, I've done a version of this in the past as well. the idea, the concept of an artist, producing a piece and it comes to life kind of thing. I did one where it was a child imagining something, and you could see the images coming out of the brain. I did one that was actually very traditional, like this one, where the guy with a brush, he was around and dragon was coming out of the ground. So it's kind of similar in this situation, but it was in this one. It's like a series of things that are going on. But as an exercise, it's also really fun to kind of reproduce a similar kind of idea and concept. The Hokusai, I would say, would be the first one to generate something like this, right? Being the fact that he did this way before than any of us. And I'm sure there were probably classical artists in the past, even before him, that had similar ideas. There is no originality. The idea is that we play with similar concepts and have a lot of overlaps, but we can play. We have different takes on it because we're all individual people. Experiences, different ideas, different ways of looking at things. So borrowing from each other is a natural, kind of response as people who create. And it's certainly not, looked down on in our industry. That is the way we work. That is the way we train. Reprinting is art, yeah. This is one thing I'm trying to do with this kind of like patterning that Hokusai did. I still don't know exactly how he does it. I don't have that exact aesthetic down just yet. I've gotten it once or twice visually, but it took a lot of thinking to get there. There's a piece in here that captures it really well, and it's a surfacing that he does. This is the book again. There's literally a single drawing in here that he does this kind of like hatching method into it. And it's this right here, this one. That right there. That one single little piece. I look at that and I'm like, I want this. I want to be able to do that, But here's the thing. You can't replicate it one to one because his movements of the brush, his pressure, his strokes is his own. He himself won't be able to produce it exactly the same. He obviously understands how to reproduce it in similar imitations of things. But I love this piece, this specific illustration. That stroke right in there, I don't care about the subject matter, but that right there alone is something I want to be able to generate just like that. I find it very visually appealing. So I'm trying to imitate that here. It's just a bit too heavy-handed right now, but it's that positive and negative, but the way his brushstrokes are moving. Trying to look at it and interpret the way he's maybe trying to do things. Hard. So which way did he go? Where is he making the choices of actual degree change of angle? Of course, the inside areas of the value structure is also different because he's using a bit of water in there, so it goes a bit gray. Age as well too probably affected it. Maybe even the paper he's using soaks in the ink. Looks a bit textured and different. Man, I love that indication of surfacing. Is it styling? Combination of styling to also technique. To the way he's actually producing this idea of surfacing things like fur. That's like patches of fur. But he does it graphically and the use of radio hatching. I found that kind of work, his drawing and line work, several years ago, probably about 5 years ago, when he was when I was teaching a lot online. I started looking at more at like sketching processes and stuff like that. And his images just popped up randomly on Google, and there was a page that I found which literally has a breakdown process of how he would build shapes, draw, and there were moments in certain techniques he would show how to he would hatch around forms. He wouldn't even do it two-dimensionally. He understood how to actually hatch in three-dimensional form. And I saw that's like, oh my god, that's like everything that I do. And it was someone who existed from such a long period of time ago, and I didn't realize, he was doing that. I only knew his stuff from the woodblock print. So when I saw that for the first time, I was blown away. I was shocked that I didn't know this stuff existed. But then that also shows you that the techniques and things that you guys are learning isn't, originated by some single person. It's curated over time through many individuals. So he himself, I'm sure, are pulling from different things he saw in his own past, right? This idea of carrying through generationally of information as it goes down, but also coincidentally, where somebody can also just come to the same conclusion as you have then, the proper aesthetics of comes out very aesthetically or even effectively in time or speed. So people can have similar outcomes even by not even seeing each other. Just the nature of how things come out work out. Right now, it's been about an hour and 20, so I was planning to go to the gym, but it's gonna be a little bit too late. I just work out in the backyard. I have a gym equipment set up in the back. It kind of sucks because the gym I go to, which is just a 24-hour, they're not open 24 hours still. They're only 10 p.m., so they shut down kind of early. Can't stand it. Just started going back to the gym again, knowing that they're not open for 24 hours. This also means in the last 2 years I've been paying for a gym membership, not going because of the pandemic. Oh well. Thankfully, it wasn't too expensive. Okay. What I'm looking at right now is just the screen on my left-hand side. Just seeing the way it looks from what you're seeing as well too. Because from the angle that I have, I see it from this particular position, which is fine. But I also like to see it on the screen itself. Question then is, how would you advise to learn from art books, and how would you integrate that knowledge into the way you're drawing? Exactly what I'm doing now, right? So, obviously you would just copy it one to one as a way of just understanding it first. From the copy, you would then use some of the elements of your copy to bridge together to create your own versions of things. So this over here resembles what Hokusai was doing, but it's not exactly a single image that he actually generated. This is my own creation, but using a lot of the elements that he has visually that I found very visually attractive. And then from that, I would actually then take it a bit further by using only just pieces of things and be able to actually integrate it into more pieces that I generate, which don't even resemble his styling anymore. That means I might even use different kind of tools, different kind of subject matters. The lines will move a little bit differently, but it still now has a built-in kind of natural muscle memory from all the training of looking at people's work. Okay, let's continue moving this direction. I'm gonna have another bird over here. Kind of migrate this into a series of animals and creatures. Still using a little bit of his line work coming in. I'm going to do a larger piece over here with like a head of some kind of animal creature, maybe a dragon or something like that, arcing this direction. Still remembering, it's easy. This is the one part which is it's easy to forget what you were doing earlier. As soon as I moved into the line, I almost like went back to like normal way of what I would do, like how I would hatch and also how I would indicate things. But what I'm trying to do is right now is being very aware of what Hokusai would do with his lines, so that way I can really incorporate that a little bit more intentfully. Where's this piece? So if anybody's going to Lightbox, if you do come to the talk, it's gonna be on Friday at like 3 p.m. or something like that, 2:50 or 3 p.m. I'll be sitting down with Marshall Vandruff, and we'll be doing a conversation and talk about artists of inspirations that we look at. And so this kind of is a early precursor to this. I'm going to bring up Hokusai again, on top of many other artists that we both kind of talked about and how we pull from them directly. So the things we're doing right now is based on then the conversation we'll have with Marshall at like If anybody goes to the show, you come check it out. We'll be doing a lot of conversation to talk about. We won't be demoing. We won't be actually drawing. It's just more conversation. But it's fun to sit and hear talks and stuff. Is it only in person, or will it be on video? It's only in person at the moment. As Lightbox Expo is here in Pasadena in October. I don't know if they're planning to stream anything from the actual kind of workshops and talks they're going to be doing. I don't know. I'm assuming they're not. I know they're going to be recording it. I don't know if they're releasing it online though. I'll find out when I get there. If you're not in person this year, hopefully you'll consider it next year. It's one show I would say for any young artists or any junior level artists, someone who's training to get to the next stage of the things. Being involved in shows and conventions like this, in my opinion, is one thing you should experience at least once in your life. Just kind of keep building towards this direction. Do not like some kind of horse-inspired creature. Again, I want to incorporate his shapes, his spiraling that he's doing, mark making. You can kind of see how a lot of this kind of stuff and what I'm seeing from Hokusai would have inspired a lot of other, very well-regarded artists out there that do this, especially guys like Terada. I look at so much of what Katsuya Terada done when I was young. For him, as he pulled from like Mobius so much, and as I looked at Mobius when I was in college days as well too, found a lot of inspiration there from a lot of the European artists, from a lot of the classical traditional Asian artists, China or Japan. Um, it's not really looked at a lot. We still look at a lot of the European people from like the classical periods, from Victorian to Baroque or whatever the case may be, and then of course even like the contemporary of graphic novels, and of course a lot of American illustrators as well too. But in Asia, we don't really look at a lot of the Asian artists until like the periods of the 80s and 90s when they start have like mangas and animes. But for a lot of the woodblock print stuff or a lot of the kind of traditional ink illustration work, I don't think a lot of young people really look at that as inspiration, because the subject matter but also the visual look of it is so distinct and really hard to apply, I would say. I'm glad to be able to actually find someone like Hokusai to pull from so more directly, instead of really trying to think about how to process all that to be able to bring it down to my own work. And seeing then the lineage and the connections towards things that goes down to multi-generation, from Terada to Mobius, and trying to do things on my own as well. How are the students being trained? Any live feedback or pre-recorded? What do you mean by that, Voodoo? Because if you're talking about Lightbox Expo, it's only a talk, so people only attend and watch. When it comes to courses that I teach, there is feedback, and so it's all live, and all the classes are also then live. There's no pre-recorded stuff. Is there any assistance with the course related materials and after work after completing the courses? I run a Discord for my own classes, So it's an ongoing thing and perpetually growing. And there are hundreds of people in there that also share their work progresses, feedback with each other. And so, yes, there's a lot of after class stuff with my own. Again, for Lightbox, it's more of an expo convention where people just come together and celebrate the work. Of course, they have talks and workshops and stuff like that, but it's more of just to come and observe and to learn to listen. We're only going to be going for about another maybe 15-20 minutes. It's about an hour and a half right now. So if anybody has, again, like I said, any last questions or thoughts or concerns or things you guys want to talk about, let me know as soon as you can, because I'm going to be ending here very shortly. Will I get this fully complete? I would like to. We'll see. I'm going to put another piece overlapping him. It's going to be some kind of elongated, inspired by horse kind of thing. Another piece on. This time we're going to go a little bit more inspirational, classic kind of dragon kind of thing maybe. Let's look back on Hokusai's work. Better my own conduction, yes. Yeah, that's the idea of Voodoo. So what I want to do is kind of go back and look at what Hokusai had done, just to be inspired by it. Again, looking for things of subjects to lines and things that he's has generated here as interesting things. Just seeing if there's anything that kind of catches my attention. Again, I could just generate my own stuff, but this is the whole point of this particular demo. This session live is just kind of see how I use things of inspiration, because you see so many artists just kind of do it and then talk about their inspirations, but they never really go into the use of it. Right here, it gives you a direct connection towards, like, for me, literally when I find inspiration, what do I do with it offhand? Just flipping through stuff. We see a lot of the kind of similar kind of animals, and he draws so much. And this is probably just a small collection of over years. Oh, that's a great pattern right there. That one. Forehead on the body. Wonder how he planned it out. Maybe he generated shapes, but no, probably not. It looks like he does the negative shape in between. They're like half moon crescents, essentially. There's that pattern again right there. I love that one. Figures are interesting. Last figures. These are all these like wood blocks. Not what I'm really using. I'm not really interested in generating a character. Then I start to kind of like curate things that I like, I don't like, I don't want to use or want to use. Like masked characters are kind of interesting, I guess. Maybe holding turtle back on that's kind of cool. Maybe holding a weapon instead. I'm gonna finish up this guy in the corner a little bit more. Now move into this lower half right here. Oh, he's smudging like crazy over here. You can't really see it on the video, but there's a bunch of smudge. That's the problem with this particular brush with the ink that I'm using, the carbon ink. This paper is also quite, it's absorbent, but the ink sits on it really well. So that's a part of a problem to it. It does sit on top of that. So I do pick up some of the actual carbon ink of it. Slightly smudges it, very slightly. Looking at positive and negative. What I'm picking up on from Hokusai right now is this idea of being able to not draw the positive silhouette, but the negative shapes in between. I need to learn how to do that more. Let's see. So Voodoo's asking also live feedbacks only after course Discord channels. So feedbacks are given live in the class as you take it as an 8-week course. So let's say dynamic sketching, we have weekly discussions or weekly lectures, which are a 3-hour, 4-hour class. Then I do a live feedback of the homework that's given to you from the week prior. When the class ends, any work that you do can be asked for feedback on the Discord. There's a literal feedback request section which I may not necessarily give all the time, but I also have on hand like TAs, and also other students can help out in terms of giving feedback. So you can have extra resources of feedback from other people. That can have varying degrees of experience, but at least you just have data of information on whether they like it or don't like it, things they can recommend. Wesley is asking, for constructing an animal, where is the best place to start, the head or the entire animal itself? I would say it varies. There's no best place. It's more about a place to start to give yourself a better understanding of context of process. Some people respond well to the head to the body. Some people like to start with the body to the head. For me, with a torso, the human being, I start there first. When I draw the person, I don't always draw the head. Sometimes I will in this iteration, but other times I'm constructing and using things like figurative studies, I'll draw the torso first, and then I go to the limbs and the head last. Any suggestions for loose leaf tone paper? I really like the one we got at the Kazan workshop. Um, you're talking about like just tone paper in general, like this. This is what you use. This is that I call it again the Desert Storm cover stock paper. This is nice, but I would say there's a lot of other types out there made by like Strathmore makes that tone paper. There's a bunch of like craft paper you can maybe play with as well. Craft paper is pretty good for like pencils and certain kind of brush pens and inks. I would use felt pen on them. Craft paper is a little bit too textured, too rough. From there, though, again, like I said, I prefer that Desert Storm paper. It's also a bit more cost friendly. And another effect here first. Again, with positive and negative. Especially with the way he moves his hatching around. A sunburst. That's the combination. This. I'm doing this just to help build it back into my. I think I may have found the rhythm pattern. Fine, and stick with this here. 3 circles together, like is then your crescent shape. Three circles again. Hatching radiates that way, then it goes that way, filled in between pattern. Didn't fully grasp it just until now, actually. It takes practice to be able to understand what it is you're looking for. You know what that kind of stuff feels like? It's literally is like a level up kind of thing. It feels like that we have a slight understanding of something, all of a sudden you just have this surge into it. It feels like that now, but then when I try to do it later on, I bet you it won't feel the same way. So this is where it takes multiple practices to be able to incorporate that in a way that you really want to. But in the moment, as I kind of sat down and looked at that pattern, I think I may have clicked into it. It feels like a little bit of a level up. Find a coin in the game. Mario Star, feels like. Let's see. Non-toxic mercury. I'm sorry. Non-toxic mercury is asking, I'm creating a fantasy world of sorts. I've only been drawing the various races and species living in the world and an occasional boat or structure, vehicle or structure. I find creating an interesting and grounded building or similar difficult. The main thing is I'm starting to feel my drawings are uninteresting. Right now, really all I have are a few general character designs. That's great. I'm glad you started with something. Don't look at this in terms of like, quality, or like, I don't have everything solidified just yet. The fact that you have the interest and the capacity and the I guess I wouldn't say necessarily the opportunity, but more in the sense that you have the chance to be able to explore it visually for yourself, where no one's really stopping you, to have the freedom to just play with things like that is awesome. Because a lot of people also shy away from it because they're so concerned by the fact that they may not be able to do it very well, or maybe it's shunned upon that you shouldn't be doing that kind of thing, or you feel personally like I just need to be doing only fundamentals. So yeah, of course, there are many things you could be doing to make it better, fix it, or to finish it, or to produce more of it. But at the same time, the fact that you have something that's a thought, that's something you're enjoying to do, you should really embrace that as much as you can. Starting to generate your own world is so difficult because it requires so much pressure put on yourself. You're disinterested because it never really goes anywhere and don't turn out the way you want to always. Let's see. Mega Mario is asking, kind of curious, will I have my own art table at Lightbox Expo? I will have a table that'll be connected with the Super Ronnie. So I'll be sitting next to Eliza Ivanova, and then there'll be Dong Ho Kim, and then Charles Liu, and then there'll be the five of us lined up at a table series. So I'll be at the opposite end from one end of it. But that's where it starts, and it goes down to where probably people want to see Kim Jong. So I'm assuming it'll be kind of crazy at that aisle because those artists being there. But yeah, I'll be there. I'll obviously have the Dynamite Bible available. I think I'll have a few copies of the Blacksmith available as well too. I'll be there honestly just to hang out. And I these kind of shows in this year, because I'm part of Superani, I don't necessarily have to like show up and set up a bunch of stuff and bring my own work anymore. I just show up and draw essentially. Um, I kind of miss running it on my own once in a while because under Superani I can only really sell the work I do with Superani. If I have any other thing that I want to generate, I can't really do it because it's under their property, under their. Not to say that I can't explore options of what I can do on my own. But now, it's still under Superani's control to a degree. See here, last couple of questions that we'll have today. Let's see. When's my next class sign up? Slim Jim Lim is going to be in October, by the I think middle of October, and if anything else, it'll most likely coincide with the Lightbox Expo. That's probably when I'm actually going to be opening up signups for next classes. And for next classes, essentially, starting in November, around November, I think I want to say before the 12th or 9th. Let me see the date. Over November, it'll most likely be the November 8th week, November 8th. And it won't be necessarily the full 8-week course. It'll be just a 5-week boot camp, essentially. So it's 5 week long for dynamic sketching, 2 sessions of that. Only the figure drawing class is coming back. The character design class and the advanced class is not coming back for next session. I'll be back next year in January. I'll have all my full classes. For the end of the year, I'm playing with the concept of being able to have a shorter, more boot camp styling of 5 weeks. Price point will drop down a bit lower, obviously, because of the lower lesson time. But it'll run for 5 weeks only, and it'll be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Then I'll be also offering an in-person experience on Saturdays. I'm working with a local art store here in Pasadena called Blue Rooster, and this is now pretty much moving forward. This is in the gears that are running. So they're letting me use their space. It'll also be a 5-week boot camp of in-person dynamic sketching. So we'll be working in-house. I'll be doing live demos and drawings, and we also use one of the weeks to go on location somewhere to go draw. So that'll be an in-person experience happening this November. Do I know the artist by the name of Joe Weatherly by chance? I do absolutely know of Joe Weatherly. Do I know him personally? Not really. But I know his work, and I think he's great. He has an awesome process and breakdown. Again, like I said, he's an artist that uses very similar kinds of approaches of what we do with breakdown structures of fundamentals. So he mostly focuses on animals, though. And the difference of that in dynamic sketching is the ability and confidence to be able to draw other things, many things, all in together in once. So he focuses on primarily only a wildlife, but I can use that similar technique to help you draw how to draw a car or a tank or whatever the case is. So that's the key difference to it, is that it's a bit more adaptable and applicable to your everyday needs. Where if you're really only interested in like animal art and maybe like creature creation, then yeah, Joe's stuff is gonna be really good. From Joe, another instructor who's really good that does a lot of animal art is his uh, student and protege, which is a John Kuo. John's awesome. And it's about almost 2 hours now. So again, like I said, we're gonna end here in about maybe 10 minutes. We're actually almost done. So, full cycle. Will the in-person class be the same cost? Yeah, it'll probably be about 400 or 450 maybe, that for 5 weeks in person. Each session will be 3 hours long, um, and we'll have obviously things like on-site location drawing, feedback live, and the seat is probably going to be in between 10 to 15 people, very limited. It'll be on Saturday mornings, starting maybe around like 10:30 or 11. So it's not going to be like super early, like at 9 or 10 or something like that. A little bit later on, so you have time. People have time to get there. In Pasadena, it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to in-person classes again. I've only been doing in-person workshops right now and in-person conventions and expos, which have been great. But I haven't really done a full class at this moment in time. So it's November when I do it. It's really engaging. Yeah, I don't plan to go back to the Concept Design Academy or Art Center at this point. A lot of it is just due to the fact that as they had found some of their own local artists or internal artists to be able to teach these classes online when I had left online, they're using them now for in person. And I can definitely approach them saying, I'm interested in teaching classes again at CDA or Art Center, but I don't want to take away jobs from those people. So, because of the fact that I have an actual viable online source of work for teaching, I don't necessarily need to do that for actual financial income. I do the in-person stuff because I really want to, because it's fun. So instead of going into those schools, which my whole point of leaving anyways was to kind of start my own thing, I'm going to partner up with a location instead and run my own programs. So that way, those young artists, those young teachers can still do what they're doing. They'll be able to grow themselves. Any last couple questions here? You're currently taking his animal drawing classes from Wesley for the Joe Weatherly. Quite difficult. Is that with feedback, by the way, Wesley? Kind of curious about his class formats. Is it under a certain program? Is it his own? Do you have feedback? How long are those courses, and how many hours is it per session? If you have any of that information, I'd love to hear it. So Peter's asking, is dynamic sketching important? I mean, like, is it a must to learn something like that? Is it a must to really learn anything? No. It's all based on curiosity, I would say. Can it help? Sure, absolutely. It helped me dramatically as a student. It really changed and altered my perspectives on how to approach design and sketching and drawing and observation. Is it for everybody? Of course not, because everybody learns in different ways, and people have different opinions and thoughts on how they absorb information of techniques and methods and the way they see the world. So, but the only way to know is to try and find out. By asking me if it's good or not, I can tell you, yeah, of course, because I'm the one teaching it. But like I said, it doesn't mean it's for you. I can tell you in terms of my experience, but I wouldn't tell you if it's a yes or no question because it's all based on perspective and experience alone. So to formulate that opinion is to be able to attempt it. So if you said, well, I can't afford the full class, well, there are many other options. You could be doing, let's say, not in person, sit-in seat. So I offer sit-in seats for the classes, which are a fraction of the cost. You don't get feedback, but you get to be involved in the process and what it actually is done. And you can make the decision of like, well, now I'll take a full class and I want to get feedback, or it wasn't for me. You do something else. That's the only way to find out, right? Formulate your own opinion. And I think that's with any sort of like technique and classwork or approach within this field that you can ask a lot of other people and friends about your thoughts if I should take it or not, and they can give you a very strong advice and opinion on things. You should take it to heart and definitely use it as a way to judge, but at the same time, it should have context of your own as well too, in combination to that. So even places like universities and schools, honestly, I would try it. Like, well, if you want to find out what it's like and if it's even worth it with the amount of cost it does take to go to these kind of places, at least by attempting it for a little bit, even one session, one term, one semester, you get a good sense and idea as to like what this school offers and if it is even useful or viable, even cost effective. If it's not, you move on. Find other routes, try some different things, experiment as much as you can. And right now, if you're learning and you're young, now is the time to try stuff, not later. Yeah, in the last session, the fourth session, which is November to December, the figurative class will be offered as a 5-week course. Again, and dynamic sketching will be offered. Those are the only two classes I'll have for the last session for this year. And again, they are the boot camp versions, so not the full 8-week course. But you have to keep that in mind. So if you want to wait to say that, well, I'll do the rather the 8-week thing next year, you can do that. But like I said, the cost will be lower because of it being a boot camp. And the boot camp full classes will have feedback as well. Okay, we are almost done. We'll do a slight recap as to what happened today in terms of the drawing. I hope some of the conversation, talks, advices were helpful to some degree for people that were hanging out for a bit longer here. Um, I hope that for next time we come back, we'll do this again. In terms of when I'm planning for it, we have shows coming up, so it does obstruct my scheduling. So I do apologize if I don't come back on for a little bit because I leave for New York next Monday. I'll be at New York Comic Con, and at New York Comic Con, of course, I'll be doing demos and stuff like that in person. If anybody is in New York and going to Comic Con, definitely stop by and say hi. That happens next following weekend, which is I think the October 8th or something like this. And then of course when I come back, I'll have my classes, and maybe there's an actual chance I can do a live stream when I come back from New York before Lightbox Expo. It might be a good way to kind of like prep for the show for people that are interested in talking about Lightbox, depending on time. If I have no other schedules of things I have to do with Kim Jong Un Super Ronnie Group when they're here in town, I'll try to do it in person, or not in person, but live stream on Twitch when I come back from New York. Not next week, but the week afterwards. Be potentially my next session. Wesley, this is for Joe Weatherly's class. The 3 hours, basically, he takes roll, and so this is live. Shows videos of drawing animals, and after the videos, he does a slideshow where he has it set to draw animals on a slide. He does offer critiques, but not during class. We do also go to the zoo, and there he. This is in person, not online. Sorry for asking more questions, but the fact that you actually go to location, you're going with him. Interesting, but he doesn't. He must draw live then with you guys, right? He shows you actual demos. Um, so that means this is an actual class that he's teaching. I have to research this more. Not because I want to take a class with Joe, because I like seeing different educational opportunities that are out there and what they're offering to learn from myself. Things that I can benefit from to actually incorporate on my own, or things to avoid. Things that I don't want to replicate as a mistake. And Joe's a great artist. I don't really know him that well personally. I don't know how he is as a teacher in terms of a speaker or verbalizing his techniques, which I'm assuming is good because he's been doing this for a long time. I don't know exactly. Yeah, the Aaron Blaze classes are mostly online, so they're tutorial videos, and he doesn't really do peak. He doesn't really do feedback, and they're all kind of pre-recorded lessons. So it's not really live. Where it sounds like Joe's class is a live version. Interesting. You don't really see a lot of that, but I thought that would be a trend I would see a lot more of, which is a lot of independent artists kind of doing teaches and or classes and teaching on their own instead of going to a school. So for me, that's why I left also art center and these different kind of places, because they were the middleman, and they take a big cut, a big percentage. Um, I don't get paid as much working through a school, which is hard. If I'm teaching like 7 classes a session, I can make an okay living, but I put a lot of hours sometimes into each class, and they don't compensate for that. But at least with my own classes, if I go over hours, I choose to. Have I read the last Ronin comics? I have. I think they were great. How does the Inktober work? There's no set rules really. As long as you ink stuff. Initially, it was about being able to ink something. You would do like an underlay sketch, you would ink it and show that. But now it's become about just using whatever materials. Doesn't really matter. The idea is to just draw every day, no matter what the result is. It could be a loose sketch. It could be a finalized thing. It's more in the fact that you be consistent. You share. Share. That's it. Yeah, modern day James. I again, like I said, I know of him. I don't really know him personally. I know he does a lot of kind of not similar, but very foundational techniques, form and angles of cameras and perspective and stuff like that. I don't know of his teaching styling, but I've heard good things, and I know he taught at Brainstorm and a couple of the schools before in the past. I don't know if he's offering his own classes now, but he must be. A lot of these instructors, I'm sure, and rightfully so, because again, like I said, it's a more viable option, especially if you have a relatively decent following on social media or things like that. You would take advantage of it. Should be taking advantage. So his classes, as Wesley is saying, is both on Zoom and in person. Interesting. Yes, he shows demo. That's good. If you want, I can. You don't have to. It's fine. Obviously, that's his content. You should keep it there. I don't want it to be shared around like that. Um, Zoom, he just shows pre-recorded videos for his drawing. Okay, interesting. Yeah, with my classes online, I don't do the same way. I don't have any videos. I don't do any pre-recorded. Every single session in turn for the last 12 years has always been live. From the demos that I do to the lessons and plans, every single session, I'll redo them over and over again. I don't pre-record stuff because I don't like it. I like the fact of being able to actually show them live and problem solve and take on questions and show them immediately of stuff that you have maybe want to see applications towards. That's why I prefer live drawing, not recorded things. More like brushes over here. Files, ink bottles, maybe. Or cups, maybe. All right. So this whole thing as a recap started off with this inspiration from Hokusai. And this particular stream was about showing you and talking a bit about how I use something like this as inspiration when I discovered the book. And how as an artist myself, who's been working for over 15, 20 years, I'll still look at stuff like this and rediscover them or discover new things about them and extract information as, we didn't do it as that copy, but I pull from the visual inspiration of things and try to incorporate it into my own work. As I do so, I can extract even more specific of things to be integrated and tied to my own. So again, this is a Hokusai inspired kind of piece here. And this particular book is the one I found in an art store. It's just labeled Hokusai. I don't know the exact book, but I did kind of find it randomly. But I've seen a lot of his like process stuff online. I've never found it printed. So this one was kind of the closest one I found that does incorporate a lot of his like studies and sketches. If it's any worth, you guys can take a look at that and see if you can find this. Last questions here. How to create an illustration of form without using crosshatch, because I feel like I cannot use cross-hatching always, and sometimes cross-hatching makes the picture dirty. I also want to ask which parts we can use cross-hatch or curve hatching, like some parts in your. Well, again, it's all based on what kind of imagery that you want to be able to express. Hatching is just one formal way of converting things of 3 dimensions. You can also do things like, say, ink wash if you want to. So if you don't want to hatch it, but if you want to capture things like value, which is what cross-hatching is for a lot of times, surfacing texture is one thing for hatching, but also value control, dark and lights. You can use ink wash if you want to for that, or use markers, right? So line the thing out, use markers to show value control for volume, but hatching, like I said, can be also very specific in use in terms of like showing that in terms of surfacing 3 dimensions. But at the same time, it's not just a stylistic thing. You can choose where you want to put it. At focal points, you can be more very incorporated all over. But like I said, hatching is not the only solution, of course. But from that, as you experiment and play with things, you then look for other artists and how they play with that kind of stuff you're looking for. Then you incorporate it to do. So what's my favorite medium to apply color to my pieces with? Reaver, it's going to be watercolors. Right now I have some markers I've been playing with recently, but watercolors is my favorite. Okay, it's exactly been about 2 hours and 10 minutes. I appreciate you guys hanging out for a little bit. I hope you guys found this interesting as a stream. Next time will be most likely after New York Comic Con that I'll be back on live. The previous live session that I had with the work piece that I did will go on YouTube probably this coming week. And this video that I'm recorded will stay on Twitch for a while, probably about a week or so, and it'll be posted on YouTube later on as well too. Watch it again if you want. If you're not subscribed to my Twitch. In any case, thank you guys for your guys' questions, interactions. I hope you found it very interesting. I will see you all next time. And if you do come to Lightbox or New York, we'll talk live then. So look more information at some point and enjoy the week. Guys, thank you.